Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message
On the book of Romans with Dan Irvin.
Welcome this week as we are taking a look at Romans chapter 2, looking at verses 17 through 29 this week. And we'll begin just in the first few verses 17 through 20. It reads this way. Paul writes, "Now you, if you call yourself a Jew, if you rely on the law and boast in God, if you know his will and approve of what is superior because you are instructed by the law, if you are convinced that you are a guide for the blind, a light for those in the dark, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of little children, because you have in the law the embodiment of knowledge in truth." And I'll stop there for a moment. Notice some of the language that Paul is using here. Rely, boast, know. Now, Paul's addressing a confidence here that is rooted in knowing who you are, knowing what God has done, knowing the law in a sense, and how the law separates those who do it well versus those who struggle. And this is a good idea, right? We should see the law as something that can help us live in a way to expose in us the ways in which we are living in a way that God never desired for us to live. But Paul is getting at something here about how even when we are attempting to live life in a good way, how we can elevate this living, this kind of living, and it can become this kind of moral substitute and replace the need for God himself. See, knowledge sometimes, it creates a sense, or it can, of control, of we know the difference between right and wrong. We know the rules. We can manage our own relationship with God, our own standing before God based on how well we are doing. But Paul suggests here that knowing the law, truly knowing the law, can actually mask something. It can mask this lack of trust that we have in God, in God's grace to cover us. As we read verse 19, listen again. Verse 19, if you're convinced that you are a guide for the blind, a light for those in darkness. This danger of when we take what we know and it moves from we're grateful for what we know because we're grateful to God for rescuing us, but that gratitude can quickly move into we are better than somebody to our right or to our left. We know the truth, but we also stand above others because we know the truth and because others don't. They are the ones that need to get their act together, or they over there with that belief or that set of, way of doing things, they are the ones that need to really figure it out. I'm okay. Well, the true gospel of Jesus Christ dismantles this idea. You see, Jesus didn't merely come to instruct us on how to obey the law, although that's good. Jesus came to fulfill the law in a perfect way, in a way that no human being ever could. And instead of lording it over us, Jesus stood with us. He came with us. He walked with us through the mess, through our sinfulness, through the moments when his disciples, those closest to him, turned their backs on him, when they didn't understand what he taught or what he meant or how they should live. Jesus stood with them. And ultimately, he stood for us on the cross. You see, it was God's grace, God's gift in Jesus that could cover us on the cross, that could remove the penalty for sin. So this passage here that we'll get into this week and these few opening verses remind us that we're not saved. We're not in a relationship with God simply because we know something. We have a knowledge, but we're in a relationship with Jesus because God has made clear to us that his grace can cover our insufficiencies, and his grace, when accepted and when rightly taken in and lived by us and known by us, can change our lives. Because it's grace that reminds us that we're all on equal playing field with the people around us, with the people that we don't agree with the people that we think aren't doing it right. God's grace reminds us that we're with everyone.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.